India's Prime Minister under attack for cracking down on foreign-funded organizations. They say they are the victims of government paranoia and intimidation. Narendra Modi says they are acting against India's national interest. What's really behind the crackdown, and what does it mean for India's image around the world? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Mike Hanna. After exactly a year in power, the government of Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi is keen to talk about all the progress it's made. It's less keen on talking about what's been described as a chilling attack on civil society, a campaign of cracking down on non-government organisations which receive foreign funding, accusing them of working against India's national interest. One of them is Greenpeace India, which had its bank accounts frozen by the government. Before we talk to our guests, Nikita Sud reports from New Delhi, where Greenpeace India is challenging that decision in court.
Coal helps India meet more than 50% of its energy needs, and the government wants to mine more of it. But Priya Pillai, an activist from Greenpeace India, is concerned about environmental and human rights violations. Earlier this year, the government barred her from travelling to London to speak against plans by a British-based company. ESSA wanted to open a coal mine in the central Indian state of Madhya Pradesh.
What we were trying to amplify were voices of Indian citizens against a foreign corporate registered in a foreign country. So how can you say, or anybody for that matter, say that what we were doing is anti-national?
The government claims Greenpeace India has broken the rules governing NGOs which receive foreign funds in an attempt to clamp down on work that it says is against India's economic interests. In April, the government froze Greenpeace India's bank accounts and cancelled the operating licenses of nearly 9,000 others.
Those who have been doing bona fide work based on their own independent mandates, based on following all the rules in terms of foreign contributions, there are no questions about them. There are some 22,000 NGOs and almost about $2 billion of funds they receive. And the surprising part is a vast, almost a total majority of them don't even file their annual reports.
We are being accused of being anti-developmental.
The executive director of Greenpeace India says the organisation will stick to its mandate.
We are environmental watchdogs. We don't intend being environmental lapdogs. So we believe that the issues we are working on will continue.
India needs energy to speed up economic growth. The government sees lots of potential in coal. With the fourth largest coal reserves in the world, India is set to more than double consumption over the next 20 years. This, observers say, will raise more questions about environmental protection and human rights violations. They fear this latest tussle between NGOs like Greenpeace India and the government is a worrying sign of things to come. Sanjay Hegde is a senior advocate of the Supreme Court of India. He says these are the hallmarks of paranoid governments.
There may be a technical breach. Every organization will have some breach or the other. But to be so totally disproportionate in your response, that is essentially to send a message. You're using a hammer to kill a fly.
Some of the organizations on the receiving end of this message say this is not only a matter of government policy, but also their survival. Nikita Sud for Inside Story.
Well, for more on all of this, I'm joined by our three guests. From Delhi, Priya Pillai, who you saw in the report just now. She's a senior campaigner for Greenpeace India. From Oxford, Nikita Sud, Associate Professor of Development Studies at University of Oxford. And also from Delhi, Rakesh Sinha, Director of India Policy Foundation and author of Secular India, Politics of Minoritysm. Let's begin with Priya Pillai. We heard in that package that the government is being disproportionate in its response. What is your view of that?
Definitely, the government is being disproportionate, Mike, because if you look at it, this is a larger political issue. You know, Greenpeace has been systematically targeted for a year now, starting, early last year with the IB report. And then it went on, the government went on to freeze or, put us on prior permission for our FCRA. We challenged it in court and we got a decision in our favor in January this year. Then I was offloaded, which again, had no basis in law whatsoever. We challenged it in court, and again we had a favorable decision on the 12th of March in our favor. Then on the 9th of April, the government of India froze both domestic as well as FCRA accounts, all our bank accounts, and they are stifling us. They are trying to, so this whole issue needs to be seen in the larger frame of democracy and dissent. Greenpeace and many other organizations who are working in India today have a right to freedom of expression. They have a right to raise valid concerns peacefully in this country. The government, in acting like this, in acting undemocratically, is trying to muzzle voices of dissent in this country, which is unbecoming of a government, of the current government, considering that India is a vibrant economy. India should lead the way in showing that, how different views, diverse opinions can coexist in a country. We are a rich and diverse country, and we've coexisted
Priya, apologies,
for years.
but I must just point out to our viewers that your reference there to being offloaded was being offloaded from a London-bound flight where you were going to discuss issues concerning the operations or potential operations of British companies within India. But let me go to Rakesh Sinha and put that question to you. Is the government being disproportionate, do you believe?
I don't agree. And I don't think that this the current government is doing. It has been, the NGOs are under scanning right from Manmohan Singh government. When there was a Kandanakulam movement against the nuclear plant, the most of the NGO, out of 11, 8 NGOs were funded 43 crores, and most of the money came from the Christian organization outside the country. So the real question is that these NGOs are acting on with two targets, one demographic, other developmental target. Every developing country has its own agenda of development. You cannot subvert that agenda. And Greenpeace movement, that movement has its agenda. Its agenda is that coal project of the government of India, power project of the government of India, they are creating dissent and they are opposing such projects. So you are hampering on the one hand you are hampering the developmental agenda. Secondly, you are misusing the fund. 60% have been spent on establishment and administrative cost, which should be, the limit is 50%. So why it is exceeding? So the Greenpeace has no answer. It is not only in India, even in France. It's one ship was bombed by the French government. So Greenpeace is in controversy all over the world. Wherever its branch is, the Greenpeace is under the controversy. Secondly, I am raising the issue that in Russia too, the government has brought out a legislation, and they have declared any NGO which is getting foreign fund are the foreign agents. Again, it was opposed, but the Russian government categorically said, we don't want any colored movement in the country, colored revolution in the country. They have faced the colored revolution in their neighboring states. So it is not the question of India only. We are not anti-democratic. Any NGO which has the agenda with peace, democracy and development can function in India.
Well, let me go, if I may, Rakesh. Apologies for interrupting you. If I may go to Nikita Sud, though. There we've heard the two poles of this particular argument. Do you agree?
I have to point out here that there is a sort of dichotomy being created between the sort of government on the one hand and NGOs on the other. India has almost 2 million NGOs at the moment, which are basically organizations that function outside the sphere of the government and market, are voluntary, have a common cause which brings people together. And clearly the government, this government or the previous government, were not antagonistic towards NGOs in some homogeneous, universalizing way. However, I have to to point out that this government is antagonistic towards NGOs that are seen to be attacking its development agenda. And here development is defined in a very homogeneous sort of way, where economic development, high economic growth, which reflects in GDP, becomes development, whereas talking about human rights, about environmental agendas, that becomes anti-development. So there is a homogenization happening here, which as an academic I find problematic.
Well, Priya Pillai,
there is no one definition of development.
Well, Priya Pillai, I mean, a couple of important points have been made here. We heard there from Nikita. We're talking about literally millions of NGOs that have been operating in India. We heard from Rakesh the point saying that this process of action against NGOs started under the previous government, not under this particular one. But why do you think that organizations like Greenpeace and the others who incidentally have got special provision where they have been put on a national watch list and have to get permission before they can use their funds, why have these organizations in particular been singled out of the millions that are operating freely in India?
Exactly, that's the big question. Why the double standards? Why are groups being singled out? The answer is very, very clear. Groups like Greenpeace who work in India, we are raising pertinent issues relating to the environment as well as rights of communities. It's not true that we are anti-development. We are totally pro-development. It's just that is speaking for tribal rights in this country anti-development, is speaking for environmental rights anti-development, is speaking up for renewable energy, decentralized renewable energy in this country anti-development, is speaking up against pollution, anti-development? No, sorry. So I think the whole issue is not about whether, it's development or anti-development. There is a larger question of, as Nikita said, there's a larger question of what is development, the definition of development. The UNDP report clearly says that natural resource depletion equals 4.9% of the gross national income, a large portion of India's communities, they depend on a natural resource-based occupations like fisheries, forestry or agriculture for their livelihoods. Snatching away these, resources from communities is not going to help in development. The region where I work in, my organization Greenpeace works in Singrauli in Madhya Pradesh. That region produces 10% of the total coal-based energy of the country. Yet you have huge issues of development. There are huge coal, health impacts of coal in the region that are to be seen. There are multiple issues there. So, snatching away livelihoods of people, snatching away resources from people is not going to lead us to development.
Well, let me go to Rakesh Sinha at this particular point, Priya, and go to Rakesh Sinha. Nobody would argue in every country there's a very careful balance and great difficulty in balancing economic development and protection of the environment, for example. But the critics of the government argue that this government, the Modi government, is intent on development at any cost. Do you think that's an unfair characterization?
I'm quoting former Prime Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh. He says, there are NGOs often funded from the United States and Scandinavian countries which are not fully appreciative of the development challenges that our country faces. So this is not the question of Narendra Modi, this is the question of the Indian state. And I think that the Indian state of 125 crore people are capable enough to care of its environmental issues. We are pro-environment people. The Hindu civilization is particularly a pro-environmental civilization. So there is no question of destroying or deconstructing the environment. There is no question of damaging the human rights or snatching the human rights of the tribal people. Thousands of people are working among the tribals and Dalits and protecting their Dalit rights. My question is to Greenpeace. Why there are 12% staff of entire Greenpeace employees, 12% are working in India. 278 employees of Greenpeace are in India, while in entire Africa there are only 38 employees are working in Africa. I think Greenpeace is motivated It is working against the power project. And there is also allegation that these or certain NGOs, it may include Greenpeace, it may not include the Greenpeace. I am not making any allegation, but there is suspicion that certain NGOs working on behest of multinationals. They are hampering the developmental activities on behest of the multinationals. So I don't agree with Priya that they are working for the human rights, they are working for the peace and development and the tribal rights. There are thousands of workers in the tribal belt, and I think tribals of India are safe. They need development. Without development, they can't be the part of the mainstream fiscal activities of the nation.
Well,
So,
Nikita Sud, very clearly, from what we're hearing here is that this is not a simple argument. I mentioned that issue of very difficult for governments in any place to balance the whole issue of economic development against the environment, particularly under a year-old administration that is intent and has promised, indeed, economic development. Do you think that it can be reconciled? Do you think that we are wrong in making this mutually exclusive, that the two can actually happen together?
Yes, of course. I mean, the crux of the matter where Greenpeace and the government have come to a head is the issue of a coal mine and right in the middle of a forest. Yeah, this is one of India's oldest sal forests, and people make livelihoods out of these forests. They are very important for biodiversity. If economic development, even if you want to reduce it to GDP and growth, and you want to mine coal to be able to run power plants, there are other places where there is coal in India, and there are other sources of energy for getting power and for running aluminium plants, which is what SR and Hindalco want to do in Mahan. And even if, as the previous speaker said, even if there are indigenous groups that want this rather narrow definition of economic growth-led development, well, they have to be consulted. This government has come to power on the agenda of good governance, and good governance by definition is participatory. So, and participation involves business actors like the coal mining companies, but it also involves the people who occupy the land at present. Without that, there is no participation and no good governance. So yes, growth and environment can go together, but it has to be a participatory, consultative process.
Well, I mentioned that it's a year to the day since Narendra Modi came to power with a historic mandate from voters and a promise to transform India. While he's been in power, the economy continues to grow at around 7% and stock markets have risen. And on the international stage, Modi has been a big hit, cultivating ties with US President Barack Obama, as well as China's Xi Jinping and Japan's Shinzo. Closer to home, though, many Indians wonder what has changed. The Modi government is yet to deliver the kind of transformational infrastructure projects promised in his election campaign. Nor, many argue, has he reformed India's cumbersome bureaucracy, which discourages investors. In February, Modi's Bharatiya Janata Party suffered an embarrassing blow in Delhi state elections, winning just 3 out of 70 seats. Well, Priya Pillai, I want to come to you, and actually in response to a question that Rakesh Sinha just asked. Why are there so many Greenpeace people operating in India compared, for example, to operating throughout the whole of the African continent?
I would like to ask him a question, We have been operating in 42 countries across the globe. Nowhere in any country has Greenpeace ever been harassed and targeted in the manner and treated in the manner it's being treated in India. Why? In every place we criticize the government, its policies, we disagree on certain policies, we agree on certain policies, we are willing to work on certain policies. We've been doing that even in India. But why this sudden whole thing? In India, we've been there for years. Why this sudden whole thing that, we are doing something against the economic interests of the country?
Let's let Rakesh answer that question. Rakesh Sinha.
She has escaped my two questions. Firstly, that why 278 staff, which constitute 12% of entire Greenpeace staff, working in India, and only 38 in the entire African subcontinent. Second question she has escaped. Why the Greenpeace misused its fund, foreign fund, 60% expenditure on administration. Is there no law in the country? Any country is governed by a law. You cannot violate that law. This is the violation of the law which has been
well,
for
she
the
is
NGOs.
now prepared to answer your question, Rakesh.
And
So
again,
let's
you are
go back
challenging the government.
and let Priya Pillai answer your question. Priya.
So on the whole question of, FCRA violation, I just want to make it clear that more than 70% of Greenpeace India's funds are raised domestically. It's raised from 78,000 Indians who support Greenpeace India. The rest is only coming into this country through a proper channel, that is through the Foreign Currency Regulation Act. The government's allegations are refuted. We have submitted a point by point refutation of what the government has said on each of the points. Basically that he's raising. It's well published. It's out in the media. It's on our website. You can go and check very in detail. Whether it's the whole matter of how much % of our funds we use for administrative cost, or the other whole issue that Sanjay has been raising. So those answers are out there on our website. The whole issue, let me bring us back. This whole issue is not about technicalities. We've not done any FCRA violations. There's a court case happening. I don't want to go into the details of that matter because the matter is sub judice. But I want to reiterate here again that this kind of treatment needs to be seen in the larger political frame. We need to see that the government is cracking down on democracy and dissent in this country.
Well, let me go to Nikita Sud at this particular
that this is what is
point,
happening in this country today?
If I may, let's go to Nikita Sud and make these questions and counter questions. Just to shift focus a little bit, there is no doubt that the Modi government is intent on bolstering its international image. And Narendra Modi has spent 52 days of the past year abroad in 18 countries. That's unprecedented for an Indian leader. Is there any concern or possibility that the action against NGOs could impact on the international image of a country's progressiveness that he appears to be so carefully grooming?
Yes, of course. So, this particular government has come to power on the mandate, as we've discussed, of economic development, which is underpinned by market reform. So the economic conditions for the functioning of free private enterprise. And free private enterprise or economic liberalism cannot function without political liberalism, which is the political conditions for the exercise of personal freedom. And if this government, whether seen nationally or internationally, is seen as clamping down on the conditions that create personal freedom, whether the functioning of NGOs or religious minorities or what have you, then markets are not going to have confidence in the government, and nor is the international community. And we're already hearing noises, not just from political leaders. So, when President Barack Obama of the US was leaving India after his rather successful trip, he gave a parting shot about, India needing to maintain religious freedom. Similarly, international investors are making noises about, how the political conditions and the kinds of violence, say, that we have seen in church attacks, how those are not conducive to investment. So, of course, the image of the government is being damaged, and it is sort of counterproductive to the foreign policy efforts being made by the Prime Minister and his team.
Well, Rakesh Sinha, your view of that, remembering as well that the American ambassador recently described these actions against the NGOs as chilling. Is there any concern or awareness of the fact that there are international ramifications that could have an economic knock-on effect?
I don't think so, because Indian government is not taking any undemocratic action. It is just asking NGO to give its expenditure account to the government. Only 3% NGO out of the millions of NGO which are active in India, they are giving the annual account and the expenditures details to the government. No government can tolerate any NGO which is acting on its soil with the foreign funding. And I have given example of Russia, which has brought out a law in 2012, and that law was challenged in the Constitutional Court of Russia, and they validated the law, because you are getting the foreign funds, so you are a foreign agent. You are trying to influence the
If I may point out, Rakesh, there has been great international criticism of that decision by Russia, is there not? Maybe not that good an example for the Indian government, I would contend.
I don't think that Russia has made the law. Even in the America, those NGOs which are getting the foreign funds, they are being scanned. It is not that it is just a question of scanning of the NGOs. And the Greenpeace movement, Greenpeace got 45 crores foreign donations in the last 7 years. And the Greenpeace is not giving its accounts to the government. They have no answer. They say to go to website. Why not Priya says that? Why 60%?
Well, at this particular point, it is a subject that we could discuss for hours, and we just do not have time, I'm afraid. My thanks to our guests, Priya Pillai, Nikita Sud, and Rakesh Sinha. And thank you for joining us on this edition of Inside Story. We'd like to hear your thoughts. You can get in touch with us on our program page at aljazeera.com. You can also post your comments at facebook.com/AJ Inside Story or tweet us at AJ Inside Story. From me, Mike Hanna, and the whole team here, thanks for watching and goodbye for now.